भवतिर्नैष्टिकी ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुदीनतारणम्। Hare Krishna, thank you so much for joining. So we will resume our discussion on the instructions by Sanat Kumar to Maharaj Prithu. And so even though the instructions are worded in a slightly complicated way, for one reason that elevated personality, the four Kumars are primarily before Bhakti, they are primarily in the mode of Gyan. And even after Bhakti, they are considered to be Gyan Mishra Bhaktas. So they tend to speak in for them it's simple, but they tend to speak in complex ways. But essentially, Srila Prabhupada has given us the instructions, simplified the instructions, and given it to us as the four Kumars recommending Prithu Maharaj and us to develop attachment to the Lord and detachment to the material conception, which is a summation of the whole process of bhakti. Essentially, the Vedas, they're designed in a way to develop material detachment, and spiritual attachment, and they present the same point in a few ways. They talk about the glories of spiritual attachment. They talk about the potency of material detachment. They talk about the detrimental nature of material attachment. And they kind of break it up into a little bit more. They basically vairagya, which is material detachment, they say destroys the subtle body, which is another way of saying that it destroys your connection to the material world. And rati, which is spiritual attachment, it takes one to the lotus feet of the Lord. And the potency of rati is that it is satisfying in itself. So unlike material endeavors that are performed for a certain goal in mind, the nature of spiritual attachment is that it is satisfying in itself. So we often hear that the goal of chanting is more chanting, which basically means that the goal of bhakti is more bhakti. It's not moksha, and the four Kumars spend some time talking about how a practitioner of bhakti is neither attached nor detached from moksha. So it does not have any attraction or aversion, but simply acts in a way to please the Lord, and then everything happens on its own. Gyan comes, Vigyan comes, Vairagya comes, Moksha appears, the nullification of karma. So all this happens automatically as byproducts. So we are now reaching towards the end of the instructions of the 4 Kumaras, and they've taken Prithu Maharaj to a little bit of a little bit of a journey. So they initially spoke about the glories of bhakti. Then they spoke about moksha, which is the understanding of impersonal liberation. And then they speak about Shuddha Bhakti. So as perfect teachers, they don't want to hide things. Right? Sometimes devotees will condemn other religions or condemn other aspects of even their own religion. And that unfortunately creates confusion in the minds of the practitioner, because when the person gets exposed to the understanding of why these other paths are there, then the person who's speaking it loses credibility. Right? So Srila Prabhupada, he always glorifies bhakti, but he also speaks about the position of the other paths. Karma is there for purification of desires, Jnana is there for purification of intelligence, Astanga is there for control of mind. So it's not that he outright condemns them as that they are not bona fide and they're irreligious. He speaks to them as they are and then contrasts with bhakti also. So it's like a person has sometimes parents hold 2 hands, hand A, hand B, and they ask the child to open. And then the child may say, give me this, give me that. So Prabhupada has bhakti and other things in his 2 hands. And if somebody opens the non-bhakti hand, then Srila Prabhupada explains then what are the advantages and disadvantages of it. Right? He talks about why Varnashram is important, which is another way of saying why Karmakand is important. Also talks about the right way to practice it. Okay, so with this with this introduction, let me resume the discussion from verse 39. Yadapad pankaj palasa vilasa bhaktya karma shayam grahitam udgratayanti santa tadvannarekta matayo yatayo pirutta shatoganastam maranam bhajavasudevam. The devotees who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord can very easily overcome hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. Because this is very difficult, the non-devotees, the jnanis and yogis, although trying to stop the waves of sense gratification, cannot do so. Therefore, you are advised to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. So we see the same thing happening over here. Sanat Kumar himself had spoken about the importance of Jnana. When he was speaking about moksha, he spoke about the importance of Jnana. So he's established it as a bona fide process. By that, he has established his own credibility. Now, he is saying that it is difficult. So he's not saying that it is not bona fide, it is misleading. He's saying it is there, but it is difficult. Because it is very difficult to stop the waves of some gratification for the jnanis and the yogis. And what is the conclusion he is saying? That therefore you're advised to engage in bhakti. So in verses 22 to 36, Sanat Kumar had spoken about Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Right? And last time we had discussed how this term, the second is the prominent, and the first is the traces. Right? So we had said when we say salt water, then water is prominent and there are traces of salt. So in 22 to 36, when Sanat Kumar spoke about Jnana Mishra Bhakti, so there's a predominance of bhakti and there is traces of Jnana. The destination is given as one who develops Shantaras, mode of neutrality. Then in verses 37 and 38, Sanat Kumar speaks about Bhakti Mishra Gyan. Right? Initially it was Gyan Mishra Bhakti, now it's Bhakti Mishra Gyan, where there is a predominance of Gyan with traces of Bhakti, and the goal that is presented there is Sayujya Bhakti, which is essentially Brahman realization. Shantarati is being elevated to Vaikuntha or even to Golok. But the mood is neutral. The example that is given is in Golok, there are trees and the cows, the pieces of sand. So they are Salokya. Right? So they are in the same planet as Krishna, but their mood is neutral. Similarly, in Vaikuntha, there is this mood of neutrality, not amongst all, but it is present there. Sayujya Mukti is essentially entering into the Brahman. So Sanat Kumar, after speaking about Sayujya Mukti and expressing it in phrases like So Asmi, like in verse 37, right? He says, So Asmi, I am you. He understands that Prithu Maharaj as a devotee considers these phrases to be distasteful. So this is Prithu Maharaj. It's not that the phrases are not bona fide. Right? They are bona fide, but he understands that Prithu Maharaj as a devotee, he considers this to be distasteful. So now he begins to speak from verse 39 about Shuddha Bhakti. And he will glorify it as the best path. This verse is also quoted by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in connection with Avidya Haratu. So as you can remember from the time that you did Bhakti Shastri, that when one begins to practice Bhakti, one of the symptoms of Bhakti is Kleshangani, or the destruction of Kleshas. We had said that they were Adhyatmik, Adhidevik, Adhibhautik Kleshas, and Bhakti destroys them from the root. The causes of the suffering are avidya, bija, and papam. Right? Avidya is ignorance. Bija is impressions from previous sinful activities, and papam is the more mature results of sinful activities. So Rupa Goswami, in order to show how bhakti destroys avidya, quotes this verse. Right? So this verse says that the devotees who are engaged in the service of the Lord can easily overcome the hard knotted desires of fruitive activities. Right? Karamashayam grahitam uddagrathayanti. And so that hard knot, which is the knot of avidya, is destroyed by the process of bhakti. So Sanat Kumar is saying that those who follow the process of Gyan and Astang, so he describes it in this verse, those processes as Rikta Matayaha. So Rikta means devoid and Mataya means bhakti. So Sanat Kumar had actually described these processes with traces of bhakti. But here he's saying that if that trace of bhakti is not there, so what do? They try to forcibly stop the flow of the desires, which are unstoppable, and therefore they eventually fall. So this is logic, right? So in order to show the potency of something, he's extrapolating it and says that if bhakti is completely not there, then they will fall. They will not make any progress. Right? Riktamatiya, if there is no bhakti, they will not make any progress, which is similar to his previous statements, that if bhakti is there in traces, they will make some progress. Either Sevja Mukti or Shantaras, they will make some progress. Now, what if bhakti is present in abundance? Then he says, no problem. For them, the flow of the material desires can be very easily overcome, because bhakti fulfills all desires and produces Gyan and Vairagya as a byproduct. So this point was initially made. It's made in first canto, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chata Ahitakam. Right? Vishwanath Chakravarti, in commenting on this verse, he looks at the face Pada Pankaja Palasa Vilasa Bhaktaya. Right? So Pada Pankaja. So Pankaja, as we know, is lotus. Path is lotus feet. And Vilas, as far as I know, let's see what's the word to word. Vilas is enjoyment, right? So he translates this phrase in three ways. So he says this means to the Lord whose lotus toes beauty increases every moment. So this is used to describe the lotus feet of the beauty of the lotus feet of the toe of the Lord, which is increasing every moment. It can also be used to describe the devotion of the pure devotees, whose devotion is increasing every moment. And it can also be used to refer to the remembrance of the beauty of the toes of the Lord, which just by remembering it, one remembers more. So the remembrance increases. So the way Vishwanath Chakravarti is explaining this, that there is the toes of the Lord and there is the devotee. And then there is the relationship between the two. So this increasing enjoyment could be triggered by the fact that the beauty of the Lord's toe is increasing, could be increased by the fact that the service of the devotee to the Lord's toes is increasing, or it could also be understood as the combination of the two, that the remembrance, the smaran of the devotee on the beauty of the Lord's toe is increasing. So what happens as a result of this? Karmashayam grahitam putra grayanti. That the hard knot of material desires is dissolved. So this is what Rupa Goswami says is the destruction of avidya. And in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, when he says that that bhakti results in kleshangani. So kleshangani essentially is burning of kleshas. The kleshas are produced because of the hard knot of material desires. So this is how bhakti is burning. Now what happens to those who do not take this process? So their plight is described in the last two lines of the verses. Sanat Kumar describes them as Rikta Mataya. So Mataya means meditation, Rikta means devoid. That they have, because they don't have attraction to Krishna, they don't have an object to meditate on, and their destination is unsuccessful. So why is it unsuccessful? So he gives the analogy of that the material desires are like the waves of a river. The non-devotees are trying to, so both the devotees and the non-devotees are trying to cross the river, but in different ways. The non-devotees are trying to cross the river by their own strength. So he said, Yatya api vruddha shrotaganas. So they're trying to cross by their own strength. The devotees are trying to cross with, excuse me, Tadgranam bhaja vasudeva. So bhaja vasudeva. That they are trying to cross by aranam. Aranam means by taking shelter. Bhaja vasudeva. So bhaja, as Srila Prabhupada says, is the root word of bhakti. So by taking shelter of the process of devotional service to the Lord. Vishnu Chakravarti says that tam aranam bhaja vasudevam. Aranam also means without battle. So you can understand this two ways. That if you do not surrender, then you will have to battle the senses and you will be defeated, right? So this is the plight of the non-devotees. Without battle also means surrender, right? Without battle means there's no battle, so you surrender. So it means that if you surrender to the Lord, then you will automatically succeed. So Prabhupada says that Jnanis maintain a desire to become one with the Supreme. But such desire is also considered to be calm, lust. Similarly, the yogis desire mystic power, and that is also calm. And the bhaktas, not being desirous of any material enjoyment, become purified. There is no artificial attempt to stop desire. Desire becomes a source of spiritual enjoyment under the protection of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. And Prabhupada further expands on the analogy of the person crossing the river. So he says that it is impossible to stop the waves in the river. However, the river flows into the ocean. So when the river flows into the ocean, then the water of the ocean that flows so it basically tides into the river, right? Because the ocean is full of water, and when the rivers flow into the ocean, then the ocean water also tides into the river. So these are generally called bays, like close to Washington D.C. is Baltimore, and the bay there's a Chesapeake Bay over there, which essentially is Atlantic Ocean. It's basically the water that is backflowing. So because the ocean is a much more larger body of water, the water of the ocean overwhelms the water of the river. So similarly, when the devotees, they are directing their efforts towards the Lord, then whether the bhakti is got karma or gyan or astam or whatever it is, because it is connected with the Lord, the bhakti to the Lord, it overwhelms everything else. So a devotee with intelligence plans so many things for the services of the Lord in Krishna consciousness that stagnant material desires become overflooded by the desire to serve the Lord. Prabhupada gives the example of Yamunacharya. He quotes this example a few times, different places, where Yamunacharya, who is a prominent acharya in the Sri Sampradaya, he's a Param Guru, I believe, of Sripad Ramanujacharya, his gurus, and he states that how he has become so attracted to bhakti that when he thinks of anything material, he had just developed this taste for it. A similar point is made in 259 by Krishna Vishayamani Vartante Nirarasya Dehinam Rasuvarjan Vasopasya Param Drishtan. The higher taste, the famous higher taste verse, where one developing a taste for bhakti loses taste for other things. Once a devotee, so there was in the earlier days of ISKCON, there was it became famous later on. Jayananda, you'll see his picture on all the Rath Yatra cards because he was instrumental in starting Rath Yatra in the West. And unlike the other devotees who had joined ISKCON at the time, who were mostly hippies, which one of the creed of hippies was that they either did not work or did minimal work. Jayananda was a highly qualified engineer. He drove a cab, earned good money, and gave all the money to the temple. And whatever time he was not working, he was serving at the temple. So once a devotee asked him that, how do you fight off material pushings? And Jayananda, he was very surprised. He said, I don't have time to think about all this. Right? So he did not give a very philosophical answer, but a very practical answer. He said, I'm so busy. I don't have time to think about all this. So it kind of captures the mood that Prabhupada is saying, that a devotee is so busy with his services or planning for the services. Right? Services is active engagement of the karmendriyas. Planning is the engagement of the mind and intelligence. So the devotee is so busy that it just pushes out everything else, and there is no material hankering. So Vishwanath Chakravarti has a long purport in this, and most of it is explained by Srila Prabhupada, so I'm not going to go through it. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's all covered by Srila Prabhupada's purport. Okay, So let's move on to the next verse, 40. Krichro maha iha bhavarnavam apalvesham sadvarganakram asukhena titirshanti tattvam hare bhagavato bhajaniyam angrihim kritvodupam vyasanam uttar dushtarpanam. The ocean of nations is very difficult to cross because it is infected by many dangerous sharks. Although those who are non-devotees undergo severe austerities and penances to cross that ocean, we recommend that you simply take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, which are like boats for crossing the ocean. Although the ocean is difficult to cross, by taking shelter of his lotus feet, you will overcome all dangers. This verse is very similar to the previous verse, but presents it in a slightly different way. So the previous verse presented the positive of bhakti and the negative of non-devotees. So in the previous verse, it was said that devotees succeed and non-devotees fail. Here, the same point is made in reverse. So there it was positive, negative. Here it is negative, positive. That non-devotees have to put in much effort and success is never guaranteed. The success of the devotees, even with very little effort, is guaranteed. Right? Sometimes they say 6 of one and half a dozen of others. So same point is being reinforced. Why do the non-devotees fail? So Sanat Kumar explains that with an analogy. So he says this material existence is like a ocean and it is filled with sharks. So Srila Prabhupada translates as sharks and Vishwanath Chakravarti calls them crocodiles, but same kind of animals that are carnivorous and attack. So what are these sharks or crocodiles? They are the 6 senses. Right? So this ocean of material existence is infested by the sharks of the 6 senses. What else is there? There is waves, and the waves of lust. So even if there are no sharks, there are waves that make crossing it difficult. The non-devotees are trying to cross it with the strength of their 2 arms. What are the 2 arms? Gyan and Vairagya. But the process is very difficult. So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments that one may with difficulty cross the ocean. Only one may. So not that one, anyone, but only one of many may cross with great difficulty. So the reason he's saying this is because this process has just been given by the 4 Kumaras earlier on. He does not want to reject it as a not bona fide process. So he's saying, yes, with Gyan and Vairagya, one can cross this ocean, but with great difficulty, only one, which means many try, most fail. And even those who succeed, they succeed with great difficulty. Therefore, best is to cross in a boat. Right? So if you imagine you're in an ocean which has fierce waves infested with sharks and crocodiles, and even though you're an expert swimmer with enormous strength of the arms, and then there is a boat that is tied there, what will you do? So sit in the boat. Don't worry about sharks and crocodiles, and simply ride the boat. So what is the boat? The boat is the lotus feet of the Lord. And Sanat Kumar says, worthy of worship. So hence, he is recommending the process of bhakti. So Prabhupada says that even though one may be an expert swimmer, he cannot possibly survive if attacked by sharks. One often sees that many so-called swamis and yogis sometimes advertise themselves as competent to cross the ocean of nations and to help others cross. But in actuality, they are found to be simply victims of their own senses. Instead of helping their followers to cross the ocean of nations, such swamis and yogis fall prey to Maya, represented by the fair sex, women, and are thus devoured by the sharks in the ocean. Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes two verses from the Bhagavatam in this context. He quotes 10:14:5, that for those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, the enemy of Mura demon, this whole material world is like water contained in a calf's footprint, hoof print. This is a fairly famous verse. Prabhupada quotes this often, and even though he might not quote it as a verse, but the fact, this analogy that is given, that the material world, the ocean of material world shrinks to as if it is water in the calf's hoof print. And the other verse is also in the 10th canto, 2nd chapter, verse 30, that by accepting the lotus feet of the Lord as the boat to cross the ocean of nations, one follows in the footsteps of the Mahajans. And by this simple process, one can cross the ocean of nations as easily as one steps over the hoof print of a calf. Okay, so this essentially is the end of the instructions by the 4 Kumaras. Now, in the next 8 verses, we will see the response of Maharaj Prithu. So we'll do verse 41. Maitre uvacha saevam brahmaputrena kumarena mamedasa darshit atmagatihi samyak prashyasvachatam nripaha. The great sage Maitreya continued, being thus enlightened in complete spiritual knowledge by the son of Brahma, one of the Kumaras, who was complete in spiritual knowledge, the king worshipped them in the following words. So the verse talks about, so it says that being enlightened by one of the Kumaras. So because Sanat Kumar was the primary speaker, even though what he speaks is what any of the 4 Kumaras would speak, but because he was the primary speaker, he is glorified as the one providing enlightenment and complete spiritual knowledge. Prabhupada in the purport says that that in this verse, the word Atma Medhasha is commented upon by Sripad Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who says that Atmani means unto the Lord Krishna Paramatmani. Lord Krishna is Paramatma, Ishvara Paramakrishna. Therefore, one whose mind is acting fully in Krishna consciousness is called Atma Medha. This may be contrasted to the word Grahamedi, which refers to one whose brain is always engrossed with thoughts of material activities. The Atma Medha is always thinking of Krishna's activities and Krishna consciousness. Since Sanat Kumar, who was a son of Brahma, was fully Krishna conscious, he could point out the path of spiritual advancement. The word Atmagati therefore refers to the path of activities by which one can make progress in understanding Krishna. So Prabhupada speaks about this, even though he does not explicitly say so, but he speaks about this to prevent any confusion in the mind of the readers about the interpretation of Atma Medhisha. So as we have discussed in the past, that Atma can refer to one of many things, and what it refers to has to be understood by context. So Prabhupada is a little concerned that people might say that the four Kumaras are Jnanis, and the path that they're showing is Atma Medhisha, which essentially is impersonal realization, Brahmavadi, essentially just understanding the nature of the self. So in order to remove that confusion, so he says that Atmani can also revert to Paramatmani. And Paramatmani is Krishna, Ishvara, Parama, Krishna. That's why he quotes Brahma Samhita. So when Atma Medha is being used, it is essentially pointing to one who is meditating in Krishna. So that's why he says that fully in Krishna consciousness. Right? So this is not just meditation on the self or the soul. Atma over here is essentially pointing to Paramatma, which essentially is pointing to Krishna. And because the four Kumaras had spoken about alternate paths, Prabhupada is contrasting the Atma Medha with the Grahamedi. The Grahamedi is thinking about material things. Right? And other places, Prabhupada also speaks a little bit more about Grahamedi. That Graha means, Graha actually literally means crocodile. So Graha, the nature of material entanglement is like a crocodile. And once it gets its jaws around you, then the nature of the teeth of crocodile is that more you try to extract yourself, the more strongly they hold you, right? Because they're pointing inwards. So when you try to pull, then the teeth get embedded even more deeply. That's the nature of material entanglement. That even if you're trying to pull by yourself, all that it will do you is entangle you even more. So what is the way to extract yourself from the jaws of crocodile is to open the jaws of crocodile. You can never pull yourself out of it. And that is attained through the process of devotional service. Okay, I'll do one more verse and then we will pause for discussion. Rajovacha krito meno graha purvam harinatana anukampana tam apadayutam brahman bhagwan yuyam agataha. The king said, O Brahman, O powerful one, formerly Lord Vishnu showed me his causeless mercy, indicating that you would come to my house, and to confirm that blessing, you all have come. So previously, as we know, Lord Vishnu had personally come to give his darshan to Maharaj Prithu, and he had predicted the future appearance of Sanat Kumar. So Srila Prabhupada writes that the devotees appear to fulfill the predictions of the Lord. Right? Famous Yadayadai Dharmasya Glani Pratyabhavata. So when the Lord wants to correct a religion, he descends himself or he sends his representatives. When he wants to re-establish the principles of religion, again he may come himself or he sends his representatives. And for the pleasure of his devotees, he comes himself and sends his devotees. Even though it is said in the third reason, the Lord is more inclined to come himself along with his devotees. The Prabhupada says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted that both his glorious names and the Hare Krishna Mahamantra would be broadcast in all towns and villages of the world. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada desire to fulfill this great prediction, and we are following in their footsteps. So Prabhupada relates this to the more contemporary preaching done by ISKCON, that the Lord desired and the Lord desired, and the devotees who were empowered by him appear to fulfill his desire. So does that mean that the Lord is not able to fulfill the promises that he makes, that he needs the help of his devotees? No. This is an opportunity for the devotees to relish in the service of the Lord. So there is nothing more pleasing to the devotees than to serve the Lord. And being an instrument to accomplish the promises of the Lord is one of the greatest services that are enjoyed by the devotees. So for the pleasure of the devotees, Srila Prabhupada once said that my Guru Maharaj was so powerful that he could have made the whole world Krishna conscious. And the disciple asked him, why didn't he? And then Prabhupada said, because he wanted to give me some service. And the same thing is true for Prabhupada. He could have made the whole world Krishna conscious, but he wanted to give us some service. So sometimes the Lord promises and the devotees deliver. Sometimes the Lord promises through the devotees. When Krishna says to Arjun that you declare it boldly that my devotees will never perish, then the Lord is making the promise, but through the devotees. And sometimes the devotees promise and the Lord delivers. Right? So in Mahabharata, when Jayadratha had stopped the rest of the Pandavas from helping Abhimanyu, so when Abhimanyu was surrounded in the Chakravyuha and he was being attacked and killed, then Arjun was in a different part of the battlefield, but Bhima and Yudhishthira and Nakula and Sahadev and the other generals, they were trying to rush to that part of the battle to help Abhimanyu. And Jayadratha, he single-handedly stopped all of them because he had this, his father actually had performed austerities and Lord Shiva had given this benediction that with the exception of Arjun, one time Jayadratha would be more powerful than everybody else. So when Abhimanyu was killed and Arjun, he takes this vow that tomorrow if I don't kill Jayadratha, by the time sun sets, then I will enter into fire myself. And then the Duryodhan is very happy, the Kauravas are very happy. They said, all we have to do is to protect Jayadratha one day. So he asked Bhishma and Drona and Karna. Well, Karna was not fighting at the time, but all the major generals, he says that you protect Jayadratha. And he puts Jayadratha right at the extreme end of the battlefield. And then Arjun is trying and trying and trying, and then he's not able to get to Jayadratha. And then finally, what does Krishna do? That by his potency, he makes it appear as if it is sunset. He creates a cloud, and the cloud covers the sun, and everything. The Kauravas think, okay, it is sunset, now the battle is ended. So Jayadratha, with great pride, now he comes and says, okay, time for you to enter into the fire. And then Krishna moves that cloud, and then Jayadratha realizes that it's not really sunset. And of course, Arjun immediately cuts his head off. So Arjun had promised, and Krishna delivers. So this indicates the very close, loving relationship between the Lord and his devotees. The devotees are anxious to fulfill the promise of the Lord. The Lord is anxious to fulfill the promise of the devotees. And there is no difference between the promise of the Lord and the promise of the devotee. One time, Prabhupada was giving a lecture, and he said that in order to go back to the spiritual world, you have to be 100% Krishna conscious. So the disciples were like, this is never going to happen. We are trapped in the material world. So Prabhupada looks at them and he says 90% Krishna conscious. The devotees are still looking, 90% is difficult. So 80%. And devotees are still like, 80% is a bit high. And I think he says 72% finally. He says 72%, but nothing below that. Right? So the promise of the Guru is upheld by Krishna. Now there's a reason, I forget the number, I remember reading it once, that there's a reason why Prabhupada gives that number also. It's based on a statement made by, I think by Rupa Goswami and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, why he gives the percentage. But the point also is that Prabhupada, as a devotee of the Lord, is giving assurances on behalf of the Lord. And the Lord makes that happen. When Prabhupada was giving initiation to his first set of disciples, and this I personally heard from Mukund Maharaj, he said, Prabhupada first said, okay, you're going to be initiated tomorrow, you will chant 64 rounds. And Mukund Maharaj says, he didn't say anything, but his heart sunk that 64 rounds, difficult to chant. Prabhupada looks at him and then he says, 64 rounds difficult, so 32 rounds. And then Mukund Maharaj still doesn't say anything. And then Prabhupada says, 16 rounds, but not one round below that. Mukund Maharaj says, okay. So Maharaj was telling me this. I said, Maharaj, if you had still stayed quiet, then maybe Prabhupada would have said 8 rounds. And Mukund Maharaj, he laughed and he said, no, I was already chanting 16 rounds, so I didn't have any trouble. I had no desire to reduce the number of rounds. But Bhakti Siddhanta would ask his disciples to chant 64 rounds. Not all disciples, those who were living in the ashram. So the sannyasis and the brahmacharis, he would ask them to chant 64 rounds. So sometimes we see the gurus give different instructions, different people modify it, and not because they're whimsical, but because they're empowered. We can't do that. So we can't go around saying that, okay, 16 rounds too much, 8 rounds fine. Or I don't see that happen now, or at least I don't have people sharing it with me. But I know that earlier on, devotees had this habit of carrying over rounds. That, okay, today I can only have time to chant 10 rounds. Tomorrow I will chant 6 extra rounds. And I remember I was having a conversation with somebody in the temple, and then he was saying, oh, tomorrow is Sunday, I have to chant 50 rounds. I was saying, well, Prabhu, you chant 50 rounds on weekends? He said, no, I've been carrying over rounds for a while. So I have to make up on the rounds. There's no support for this. Nobody says that, that you took a vow to chant 16 rounds every day, you chant 16 rounds every day. And the vow is not that I will chant 16 rounds on an average every day over a period of a month, or that's not the vow. You chant 16 rounds every day, you follow that around. So this verse essentially is giving what is called double assurances. That the Lord is committed to making the promise of his devotee come true. The devotee is committed to making the promise of the Lord come true. So when such an instruction is being presented, then the practitioner is getting assured both ways, by the potency of the Lord and the potency of the devotee. So Maitreya is saying that Rajavacha, this is Prithu Maharaj. Prithu Maharaj is saying that this is anukampana, that this is the symptoms of compassion. Srila Prabhupada in the purport gives 4 examples of the compassion of the Lord. So Prabhupada quotes famous Yada Yada Dharmasya, that his giving promise to protect the devotees. Then gives the example of Lord Buddha to protect the animals. Gives the example of Lord Narsimadev to protect Prahlad Maharaj. And finally, the example of Lord personally coming and sending his devotees out of compassion. Okay, so let me pause here and see if there is any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I also heard that Prabhupada said, for those that cannot, I'm not saying they cannot chant 16 round or do whatever, but the last resort is, he said, to hang on my duty.
You do what?
To hang on his duty.
Hang on his duty, yeah. Yeah. So after we do everything, after we chant 16 rounds, we follow the regulative principles, then we become qualified to hang on the dhoti of Srila Prabhupada. Okay? It's not a substitute, right? Because what does hanging, it's a metaphor, what does hanging on dhoti means? That you're taking shelter of Prabhupada. What does taking shelter mean? You're following his instructions. Okay? So we shouldn't think like that, okay, Prabhupada is all, or even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Like we say, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Mahavadanyaya. And what's that bhajan that Nadiya Godume, Nityananda Mahajan, Patiyache, Namache. And one of the words there is that you have come for the benefit of those who are most fallen. And since I am the most fallen, I have full rights to your mercy. So once a sannyasi was talking about this, and he was saying that people should not think about this verse in a way that to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda, you have to be fallen. So since you are not fallen enough, you can fall down a little bit more, and then you will get more mercy of Nityananda. So a person says that okay, I'm not stealing, I'm not doing illicit sex, so I may not get the full mercy of Lord Nityananda. So let me try and do all these, and then I will get even more mercy. Right? The mood there, I think it's Srinivas Acharya who sang, maybe Narottam Das Thakur, I don't know. But the mood is that right now I am that. With all that I'm doing, I'm the most fallen. So give me your mercy. So mercy is doing your best and then hoping to get some protection. It's not doing your worst and then hoping to get protection. Okay, that's Vikarma. It's a good point you made, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. That means, to summarize, is doing your absolute best, then let it to Krishna to give the mercy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. First of all, happy Krishna conscious birthday. I didn't know that. We are glad that we are hearing from you on your birthday. So, a clarification. Basically, earlier, a few of I think it is 3940. We spoke about devotees and non-devotees, right? The way they cross the river and all. So, however we deal with either it's a devotee or non-devotee, it's a very thin line on the offenses I'm talking about, right? Like if a devotee who has certain norms like chanting, his own sadhana, and with our interactions with a devotee or a non-devotee, there are situations or circumstances where we do offend them, right? So how to grasp this? Like offending a devotee is more harmful for us, right? Or offending even the mercy, just know what you said, like holding a dhoti or like holding a hand of a dhoti. Mercy or their offenses, it is more higher for a devotee rather than a non-devotee. But why we have to, is there any kind of a lenience we can, that is the second part of the question, how to deal with, when we deal with a non-devotee, we should be in that comfort zone that he doesn't come into that category and we are okay to deal with this.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's a very good question. So an analogy that can help understand this is that so there was this father who was taking very good care of his son. He gave him good education, good protection. The son grew up, got a good job, strong, opulent, and the father became old. So then the father said that, take care of me. I'm old, I'm dependent on you. And the son says that it's my duty to take care of all the elders. And this world is full of elders. So let me take care of them. In principle, it is laudable. It is highly, is worth glorification. In practice, what the son is doing is that in order to not take care of his father, he is changing the scope. Now, somebody might say, fine, it is good to take care of the elders, but your father is an elder. At least take care of your father and then take care of the elders. So it is good to be equally respectful towards non-devotees. But after one has developed that mood towards the devotees are special. So there's nowhere where the instruction is given that you respect the devotees and disrespect the non-devotees. That instruction is never given. But yes, it is given that you be careful in your conduct towards the devotees, serve them, etc. When you're sufficiently purified, then you can serve everybody. Because just like the father has a special relationship with the son, which the others don't have, even though they're elders. The devotees have a special relationship because of their proximity to Krishna. So if the son is serving the other elders and not serving his father, there's no hope for him. Right? Only time there is hope for him is if he is serving his father and the other elders, because of the special relationship with the father. This is actually, it's interesting. I mean, obviously you're not bringing it up in that consciousness, but this is actually a very standard response to when devotees speak about the special position of Vaishnavas. When they're speaking in a mixed circle, somebody says that even if they accept that, fine, I accept Krishna is the personality of Godhead. And then the devotee says, never offend Vaishnavas. And then say, okay to offend others? And then you say, serve Vaishnavas. What about others? You don't want to serve them? So this is a very standard response that kind of attacks the core of our philosophy, that serve Krishna, serve Vaishnavas, never disrespect Vaishnavas. So the understanding is that first learn to serve Vaishnavas because of their special relationship to Krishna, and then serve everyone else. First learn to not disrespect Vaishnavas, because it is easy to not disrespect Vaishnavas, and then expand that to others, right? Because of their special position.
In that journey, Prabhu, we'll not have any kind of a boundaries or control when we deal with a non-devotee. So how to address those reactions?
Another good point. So generally, this is in the purport of NOI. Because we do not know who is a devotee, who is a non-devotee, we try and treat everybody like a devotee. Which means that we for sure do not offend or disrespect them and try and serve them. When it comes to the question of association and taking instructions, then the recommendation is to be more discriminating. So the outer circle is, do not offend anybody. Don't think this person is a non-devotee, so I can think less of them and treat them in a disrespectful way, because you don't know, the person may be a devotee. And secondly, Krishna will not be happy with that also. Even if that person is a full-on non-devotee, even then it's something that will not please Guru and Krishna. So that's our safety zone, that treat everybody as if they might be a devotee. But when it comes to intimate association, when it comes to the principle of dadadi pratiganati, when it comes to the principle of taking instructions, then one should be more discriminating, understanding whether the person is a practicing devotee, confidentially inquiring to understand the mood of the person, and then aligning oneself in the relationship. Is that okay, Prabhu? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just one thing in your class you were mentioning about how bhakti, when one takes shelter of bhakti, how one can cross over the material ocean. It shrinks to a size of water in the calf's footprint. I heard this. I don't know whether I heard from your class or from somebody else. It says it's a nice way to understand that. For me, it was when we take to bhakti, we move away from pravritti marg to nivritti marg. As we move away from pravritti marg to nivritti marg, the world shrinks into a calf's footprint. because we are reducing our own needs through the strength of the bhakti, and so it's easy to cross over the material ocean. So that's something that I heard, so that I thought I would share.
This is actually the first time I'm hearing that, but it makes complete sense. So thank you for sharing.
And also one more point which I would like to bring in, which Maharaj spoke in the morning or yesterday. Bhakti is just to serve. It's as simple as that.
It's a good point. Okay, moving on. Verse 43. Neshpadischa katasnena bhagavad virgranadubhihi sadhu chishitam himil sarvam atmana sahakim dade. My dear Brahman, you have carried out the order thoroughly, because you're also as compassionate as the Lord. It is my duty, therefore, to offer you something. But all I possess are but remnants of food taken by great saintly persons. What shall I give? So Prithu Maharaj is glorifying the four Kumars. He's saying, you have carried out the order thoroughly. What was the order? Lord Vishnu. So Lord Vishnu had spoken in form of a prediction. And Prithu Maharaj understands that the desires of the Lord are the instructions to his devotees. So that's why he says, you have carried out the order of Lord Vishnu thoroughly. Because you have the same nature as the Lord. The Lord is compassionate and you are also compassionate. Now he's talking about Guru Dakshina. Right? So it's a duty of a disciple to reciprocate to the mercy of the Guru. So he said that it is my duty, therefore, to offer you something, some dakshin. Then he says, what can I give you? Because all that I possess is the remnants of the food taken by great saintly person. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Prithu Maharaj is saying here that I do not see anything to give you as Guru Dakshina. And the four Kumars may say, they won't say, but just for the sake of discussion, they might say that you have this whole kingdom, you're ruling this whole earth planet. And Prithu Maharaj will say, but this is given to me by the sadhus, by personalities like you and Bhrigu Maharaj out of mercy. It's not mine. It's been given to me. So what can I give you? So he calls it sadhu uchishtham. That this is the remnants that I have received from the devotees. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that sometimes, and this may be more of things that may happen in the past, now it doesn't happen. So sometimes out of affection, the father may chew a beetle and give it to the son, the chewed beetle, as a sign of affection. It is inappropriate for the son to chew the beetle and then give it back to the father. So Prithu is saying, all I have got is from Brahmanas like you. So how can I give that back to you? So Prabhupada says that Prithu Maharaj's possession was something like that. Whatever he had possessed had already been chewed, and therefore he could not offer it to the Kumaras. Indirectly, however, he offered everything he possessed to the Kumaras, and consequently, they utilized his possession in whatever way they liked. So this essentially is Prabhupada giving us a glimpse into the next verse. So Prithu Maharaj, by acknowledging that everything that he has is the mercy of the Brahmins, he is already offering everything to the four Kumars. Let's see in the next verse. Pranadaraha sutah brahman grahascha sa parichadaha rajam balam mahikosha iti sarvam niveditam. The king continued, therefore, my dear Brahmanas, my life, wife, children, home, furniture, and household paraphernalia, my kingdom, strength, land, and especially my treasury are all offered unto you. So there seems to be a contradiction. In the previous statement, Prithu Maharaj had said that he cannot give anything to the four Kumaras because whatever he has been bestowed by the Brahmanas. So Sridhar Swami, he clarifies this apparent contradiction with an analogy. So he says that a master, he may purchase many ingredients by his own strength. He has money, so he goes and he purchases some potatoes and some tomatoes and some spices and some oil, and then he gives it to the servant. The servant cooks, makes good prasadam and gives it back to the master. Now the servant is not, he's not adding anything. Everything that he is doing, the fire, the utensils, the ingredients are given by the master. But what he's essentially offering, he's offering his own shrama, his own effort, his own expertise, his affection to the master. So Prithu Maharaj, in the previous verse, he said, everything that I have is yours. Now he's saying, I'm offering you all that as a symbol of my affection. So often when we have this discussion about, Krishna says, Ishavasyamidam sarvam, that I own everything. And sometimes people say, Krishna owns everything. What can you give to Krishna? He already owns it. Right? So yes, he owns it. But when we cook and offer, then we are offering our effort and affection to Krishna. Yes, he owns all the ingredients, but we are still offering it back to Krishna as a symptom of our affection. One point is that when Prithu Maharaj is saying, I'm offering my life, wife, children, etc., and then he says, especially my treasury. So why does he say, especially my treasury? And it is explained that Vishnu Chakravarti explains that it's more of a, I guess it's more of a technicality and point of interest, that in ancient times, the kings had two treasuries. One was the treasury of the kingdom, and other was the king's personal treasury that did not belong to the kingdom. He says, Ratna Bhand. So the king is saying that not only am I offering my kingdom and the treasury, but also offering what is personally mine. Now we see that he is saying that I'm offering my wife. Now, so Dhara, right? He says I'm offering my wife, and one may wonder that the four Kumars are Naishtik Brahmacharis. So they may get a little concerned that Prithu Maharaj is offering his wife to them. So Prabhupada explains that Dhara may be a corruption of the word. Essentially, he's saying that Dhara it may be incorrectly put over here. And the word that should be there is Raya. So Prabhupada says, Dhara or wife is not permitted to be offered to the Brahmanas. Everything is offered to the worthy person who are able to accept that charity. But nowhere it is found that one offers his wife. Therefore, in this case, the reading Raya is more accurate than Dhara. So Raya essentially means possessor of wealth, like Ramananda Rai. Right? So Rai is essentially, Ramananda was the governor of the state. He was a possessor of great wealth. So Prabhupada said that Raya essentially means that he's offering his wealth. Okay, moving on to the next verse. So we'll do 2 more verses, and then after that, pause for discussion. Senapatyam cha rajyam cha dandanetrapatam eva cha sarvalokadipatyam cha veda shastra vidarati. Since only a person who is completely educated according to the principles of Vedic knowledge deserves to be commander-in-chief, ruler of the state, the first to chastise, or the proprietor of the whole planet, Prithu Maharaj offered everything to the Kumaras. So even though it doesn't say, but this is essentially Maitreya watching. Maitreya is now talking about the qualifications of, or glorification of Prithu Maharaj. So what are the qualifications of one who can be a king? Veda Shastra with Arhati. One who is completely conversant in the principles of Vedic knowledge. So in accordance to his position as a Raj Rishi, as a Veda Shastra Vidarati, he deserved to be the commander-in-chief. So different attributes of the king are given over here, that he is the commander-in-chief, he is the ruler of the state, he is the foremost of the chastiser, he is the proprietor. So these are all different attributes of what the king can do, but the qualification is Veda Shastra with Arhati. And because he was Veda Shastra with Arhati, he is qualified to offer everything to the 4 Kumars. I'm sure Prabhupada takes this opportunity. This is a point Prabhupada makes often in terms of what is the best form of governance. So he says that a monarch who is guided by the Brahmins represents the best form of governance. So the guidance is from the Brahmanas and the sages. So he expands on it. So he says that in a perfect democracy, so this is not a corrupt democracy, but perfect democracy, the king considers himself as a servant of the people. In monarchy, the king considers himself to be the servant of the Lord. In Marxist communism, Prabhupada says that equal distribution of the wealth is never achieved because of inherent corruption in the system. However, with the devotee king, there is Vedic communism. And there is no question of starvation. Prabhupada makes the same point when he's commenting on Ishavasyavidam Sarvam. He says that this is spiritual care. He says this is spiritual communism. So communism, as you know, is that everybody gets a share of the wealth. But when it is guided by the relationship to the Lord, then it becomes perfect. So Prabhupada says that monarchy in itself could be either beneficial or destructive. So example of King Vena, he was a monarch, but really harmful to the planet. And then there is the example of Prithu, monarch, but beneficial. So what is the difference between the two? That Prithu was following the instructions of the Brahmanas and the sages, and King Vena was not. The Prabhupada says that Veda Shastra Vidarati, all high government posts are specially meant for persons who are conversant with the teaching of the Vedas. Vishwanath Chakravarti, commenting on this verse, actually says that this also indicates that when Prithu Maharaj is saying that I give you everything, he's giving it not out of pride, but out of humility. So he's not saying that I have so much in my treasury, I own the kingdom, so take this. But he is seeking the mercy of the four Kumaras in their acceptance of the kingdom. Like sometimes when people give in really humble state, they say, for my benefit, please accept this charity. Not for your benefit, but for my benefit. So this is the mood that Prithu Maharaj is actually displaying. So I know I said 2 verses, but the next verse is Prabhupada has a fairly long and a very, very intriguing purport. I won't be able to do justice in the remaining time. So I'll pause over here and see if we have any thoughts or comments on what we have discussed.
Prabhu, just a comment. For example, when we were saying we cannot take this, or what we have and give it back as offering. In the Ganges, when we take Ganges, or even in the river Yamuna, we take the same water and we put it back. I think we took that example many times, but it's still, they accept the water back.
That's a very good example. Prabhupada gives that quite a few times. That offering to the Lord is very similar to offering the water of Ganges. So when we offer it, we chant the mantras, or we accept, we show our gratitude, and we use the media of the water of the Ganges to offer it back to the Ganges. So that essentially is a mood. The Lord has given us everything, so we offer him back what he already owns, but now it is infused with our gratitude or our affection or our understanding of our sense of duty. So yeah, thank you for that point, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are no more comments. We can end, and we'll try and finish the chapter on Monday when we meet. We have quite a few verses left. I think this is 62 verses, but the remaining verses are not very dense. They're mostly glorification, so we should be able to complete it next Monday. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.